I told him it was useless, Alan, but he's a most persistent fellow.
I came all the way from England, Mr. Quatermain. The least you can do is to give me information.
If I can, I'd be glad to.
The last word we had from my brother-in-law was a letter which he sent from here. He said he was heading west into unexplored territory. Mr. Masters tells me that you refused to guide him.
I most certainly refuse.
Why?
Because when I die, Mr. Good, I hope it will be doing something slightly more sensible than trying to run down a legend about a lost diamond mine.
You mean the country's dangerous?
I don't know if any white men have ever been in that region before, but I do know that none ever returned to tell about it. Yes, Mr. Good, it's dangerous.
But you must admit, Alan, that as far as we know, Henry Curtis could still be alive.
Well, as a captive, perhaps, but the chances are very slim.
My sister feels if there's any chance at all, she must pursue it. She's had a bad time lately. She can't sleep nights, wakes up screaming, dreams about him wandering in the jungle.
Surely you've made other inquiries about him, Mr. Good.
All we've been able to learn is that Henry was headed through the Kalawana country.
Kalawana country?
Well, what about it?
Thousands of square miles, Mr. Good. Even the natives are afraid to go near it.
And how would you proceed to get there?
We have a map. Henry sent us a copy of the map he planned to follow. Here.
I tell you, there are no maps. There isn't a native village or river recorded beyond the Kalawana region. These sort of maps are constantly being peddled to greenhorns from Timbuktu to Johannesburg.
You may be right, of course. Henry said he bought the original map to King Solomon's mines from an Arab trader who claimed it was 400 years old.
The Flying Dutchman, Mr. Good. Captain Kidd's treasure.
All right, there is no diamond mine. But at least the map tells us where to look for Henry. And with your help, we'll follow it.
Mr. Good, I assure you, you have absolutely no idea of the dangers of such a trip. Neither have I. But at least I can guess. My advice to you is to take your overwrought sister back to London as quickly as possible. I'm sorry I can't be
I told Elizabeth about my meeting with Quatermain. She left at once to see him herself.
My brother told me your reasons for turning us down, Mr. Quatermain, but there was one argument he neglected to use.
What was that?
Money.
Well, that's a very good argument, Mrs. Curtis.
I'm willing to pay almost anything.
I can't understand your determination to go on with this foolishness.
Well, for one thing, it's quite possible that you're exaggerating the dangers. With proper equipment and your services, we should be able to manage. I'm not afraid.
Your courage does you no credit, Mrs. Curtis. It's the result of ignorance.
What is your usual fee for a safari?
Oh, £200 and all expenses. I wouldn't undertake this one for 500.
Would you for 5,000?
5,000? Well, that's a great deal of money.
I mean it.
It's more than I could save in a lifetime. Would you pay it, win or lose?
Yes.
Even if you backed out before we got a tenth of the way?
You expect me to back out, don't you?
Oh, I'm counting on it.
I'll pay you 5,000 in advance and a bonus of 500 at the end, whether I back out or not. You're weakening, aren't you? You've half decided to accept.
Oh, I've fully decided to accept. I'd try almost anything for that much cash.
Well, then you're not so certain after all that we'd never return.
I'm just as certain as ever.
And yet you'd go?
Mrs. Curtis, the average life of a man in my profession is 8 or 9 years. I've been at it now for 15, so you see, I'm living on borrowed time. My wife died here 6 years ago. Sooner or later, an animal, a native, or some sort of disease will get me. But I have a son in England. Now, the money you're offering would provide for him very nicely until he's old enough to take care of himself.
I see.
So I'll take your safari. But before we leave, I'd like to send the money to England. You can pay the bonus when we return.
You mean if we return?
No. From now on, we'll say when we return. What I privately think must never darken the spirit of this fine safari.
Mr. Quatermain, there's something else on your mind. What is it?
I simply don't understand your motives.
You don't understand? Or you don't believe them?
Well, frankly, I don't. But it's wiser if we don't discuss it, Mrs. Curtis.
Why?
Well, because on a safari, it's better to travel with people one
Give me
likes.
time to recover. Oh, in that case, you better tell me now and give me time to recover. Now, what about my motives?
Well, it's occurred to me that since your husband's body was never found, you can't inherit his money until you've proved that he's dead.
One of the reasons my husband went looking for that diamond mine was the possibly foolish hope of finding a fortune of his own. You see, I hold all the wealth there is in the family.
Oh, I still don't understand.
That I'd be willing to risk my life for my husband.
That you propose to throw it away. That's not normal. It has a smell of sickness about it.
I happen to love my husband. Or is that something else you can't understand?